Hey guys, what's up? This is Joel at Doom is For You Gaming. I'm going to be showing you how to clean an NES, Super NES. This one has been cleaned before. My nieces have been using it, so as you can see, they got some food on it, but it's still pretty clean. They barely used it, but this will just be a how-to video, more or less. I'm going to show you how to clean it and open it up and what you'll need. And then in the second part, I'll show you how to clean an NES cart. This one's mainly just dusty, not really dirty. So the first thing you're going to need, well, there's a couple things you need. This is rubbing alcohol. Basically, 91% is the best. Just get standard, don't get like with alloy and all those other stuff. You just want a standard one. 91% means it evaporates quicker, so you will actually it will dry faster, so it won't sit on your electronics. That's important. And then you will need 2 toothbrushes. These are like, you buy 6 of these, I think, for like, they're at Walgreens for like maybe, for like $2 or so maybe. So they weren't expensive. Now, some people say use Q-tips, but I don't use Q-tips because I found out they get stuck inside the cartridge slots and stuff, like the little furs. I'd spend a lot of time pulling them out, so I would not recommend Q-tips. Then you should, 2 cups. They don't have to be this big. It's just you're going to be taking apart screws, and you want to kind of separate them, so you may need more depending on the system. This is a standard paintbrush, which I got from Michael's, which wasn't cheap. It came in a set. For instance, these in different sizes. There was like 3 of them. And I use this to get in the deeper parts and with rubbing alcohol. I'll show you how to do that later. Then you will need a pink eraser. This is going to be for the game cartridge, so this is for later. And then this is, I use the back end of an old nail clipper to get it in the cartridge slot, because unfortunately I don't have a tool to really do it. Sometimes there's like hair and stuff in there, which I'll show you how to do. And then you will need these, let me try to get them in focus, NES security bit screwdrivers. The big one is for the consoles, the little one, this one's for the consoles, the bigger one is for the consoles, and it actually works on a lot of Sega Genesis games too. The smaller one is for the game cartridges. For instance, Game Boy Color games and Game Boy original games and Super Nintendo all the way up until the N64 to the NES. And then this is not needed, but I would recommend it. This is, I don't want to hold this close because I don't want to ruin my phone. And do not keep this by electronics. This is a giant magnet, basically. It can hold like 60 pounds or something, or 20, I forget the exact weight. I got it at like hardware store. I think it was like $3. The reason I got it was, if you notice my carpeting, it's very thick, and I tend to lose a lot of screws. So what I do is I go like this, and it will pull it out of the carpet, so I never lose a screw that way. But I would keep this somewhere away from other electronics. For instance, me, it's up on top of my shelf. Alrighty. Let's get started. First things first, you're going to have to obviously open up the Super Nintendo. To do that, there are, hold on, I'm going to get a light. Four screws. That are, this is really hard to catch her on camera. Let's see if I can do this. Actually, there's 4 in the corner. They're hard to see on camera, I'm sorry. There's about 6 screws you gotta take out. You can see them actually in your console. And you gotta remove them with the security bit screwdriver, the big one. So what you do is you put it in, make sure it locks, and turn, which I actually have to use this for me, because I forgot I actually screwed these down with the electric last time, so they're kind of hard to get out. So basically you do the same thing. Make sure it locks. And get it on there. Then wrong way. I got this one out. I'll have to fix the other one later. You turn it until it's loose. And the last screw I have to get. Which I think might be stripped. Oh, nope, I got it. I think. There we go, now it's coming. So then, now you could do these screws one at a time if you don't want to lose them. I'm just doing them all at once to get it over with. Turn the console over. Sometimes all of them don't come loose. Most of them did, except for the back ones are still in there. I'm sorry if this is not the best video. I'm kind of doing this with one hand. At one point in my life, I'll have to get a real camera, not a phone. And then flip it over again. Hopefully they all come out this time. I had to put it down for a second, but now that all the screws are out, collect them. For instance, there should be this many. There is 6 screws in the Super NES Model 1. You know those cups you had? There we go. You're less likely to lose screws this way. And then flip it back over. Pop it off. We'll do the cartridge slot last, but I mean the plastic last. So now there's going to be a couple more screws you got to do. There's one here, 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 and there's one there. Here, and then these 2. And then I believe there might be, maybe not. Okay, I thought there was one in the front. Guess not. So you have to remove those screws. That you will need a Phillips screwdriver for. So I forgot to take out. This one is probably too big, but we'll see. So then you, it's a little big, but, oh, well this one actually doesn't have to come out. So then you unscrew the first screw. I'm going to unscrew the power switch first. These are all internal screws, and a few of them are different sizes, so don't forget. For instance, the cartridge slot ones are pretty much the only ones that are silver. And put them in your other cup. These are for innard screws. As I said, I'm sorry if this is not the best video. And that's off. Put your screw in. See, now the power switch just comes off. Next, remove this. Oh, and be careful not to lose the metal pipe, which goes back in there. Make sure not to lose the spring either. And now we have to remove the rest of the screws. So let's start with the RF shielding, which is the metal plate here, which has two screws. One underneath. Actually, I can just... Sorry. One I can just gently wiggle this out. And if you wiggle this out gently, it's out of your way, it's the power cord. You can actually clean that out later too. Why is my... Sorry. To adjust the brightness. Next, we take out the next screw. I really should not be doing this through the camera. I should just focus on the work. But I want to make sure I'm catching everything as best as I can. That's why my aim is off when I'm removing and sticking the screws. And we get the next screw for the RF shielding, which is over here. Pull it out. Oh yeah, and be careful not to strip the plastic, because then the screws won't stay in tight. Though chances are once or twice they'll actually get stripped a little bit. It happens. Next is the cartridge slot. These are easy to remember because you'll see they'll be longer too. Oh, maybe not that much longer. No, they're actually the same about, but they're silver. There's a couple other silver screws, but they shouldn't be too hard to remember. If you need to, you can separate them. But I've done this a bunch of times, so I don't need to. And then the RF shielding after that pops off. Now this has been, it's a little dusty, but it's pretty clean. You can clean this off if it has rust. You can use Brasso, there's other videos. But most likely you could just use a little bit of Brasso if it's not really rusted to polish it gently. What I did a little bit. It's not the greatest polish, but then again I'm no expert. But it's a little bit better. It was muddy looking before, so... And you can gently polish it with that. If it's rusted, though, there's other videos by people on how to clean these off. I haven't tried them yet, but you need like special spray paint and stuff to stop rust from coming back, apparently. Then this actually can just pop out. Be careful of this strip, though. I'm not sure if that's removable. It probably is, but these things can tear. These are the cheap way of making plugs, in my opinion. Okay, and the next... We're almost done. We got, I think, these last 2 screws, maybe. Let me turn this around. Right down here. I'm really not holding the NES Super Nintendo down, so sorry if it's not the best job in the world. Normally I'd be holding it down firmly with 2 hands, which makes this a lot easier. It's not as hard as I make it look. Then loosen that screw. Put it in your little container, or cup, whatever you're using. Then there are 2 more screws, I believe. One right here and then one right next to it, which you can kind of see. Oh. These screws are a pain in the butt, by the way, sometimes. They sometimes won't come out. So what I have is, be careful not to touch this or anything. This has a bit of a magnetism to it. This is sometimes what I use to start screws and pull them out. See? Magnets, gotta love them sometimes. Then the last screw, actually I might not even need to, no, it's bolting it down, is right here. Can't really see it, but that's the last one, I think. I need to, and then, oh, let me, you can, actually, you didn't even have to take that screw out, that's for the RF holder. But, there you go, your whole motherboard is completely out. Now, if you ever have to clean under these, oh, hold on. Oh, I actually did have to remove that. See? So now we have to remove the other shields, which are under here. There's 4 screws. I gotta be careful because I don't want to ruin my Super NES. The motherboard is fragile, so you need to be careful not to over-tighten screws and stuff. Don't want to bend the chips in the circuits and capacitors and stuff. And the last screw. Now, sometimes those shields on top of the RF are actually welded down. This one, luckily, isn't, but on, like, the NES, hold on. The shielding is welded on. And before you pop this off, make sure to unscrew this. I don't know if I can get a shot at that. Do not bend that. I believe that is part of the supply power. I don't remember what it's called off the top of my brain, but it's very important, so you gotta be careful not to bend it or break it, that little chip. take the last screw out, and then voila, if this is dirty, you could do the same thing with brass, so just make sure it all dries and wipe it down good. This is pretty clean, so I probably cleaned it before. And voila, we have access to the console now. See? This plastic here is actually, I believe, soldered on. You cannot remove the plastic without having soldering skills, which I do not. So if you ever have to get in there, yeah, I think it's soldered on at this point right here in the corner. So, not happening on my part. Alright. So now that we got that out, let's make some room here. Move some things. Open up your rubbing alcohol, 91%. This is a new bottle I just got because I just ran out. Obviously, this stuff is flammable, so you want to make sure it dries completely before you use your console, but this stuff dries in a matter of minutes, but just be careful. And also, it's flammable, and read the warning labels, that's why they're there. Now we're going to bring this over here. Now, if you look on this, this is actually pretty clean. As I said, I cleaned this out before, so. But I'm just going to show you, basically, if the circuit board was very, very dirty, I would maybe use some contact cleaner on it. That's safe for circuit boards. You got to make sure it's compatible with circuit boards, and you got to make sure it totally dries before you turn it on, otherwise you're going to destroy your console. So, but I would do that if I had to, but I don't have to do it on this one. Luckily, it's been cleaned before. And actually there you can kind of see, because of, that's another thing, that right there is some of the ink. Sometimes the circuit board cleaner is a little bit too good, where it actually removes the white ink around the stuff. So that's how they identify the pieces, but you can look up diagrams online and stuff by looking up your motherboard. And now we're going to take our little back end of our nail filer. Well, first, actually, what you could do is hold up the board. I would be normally holding it and dust it out. I can't hold it with one hand, but... And don't tilt this down because it will spray liquid nitrogen. These have liquid nitrogen in them, so be careful. This is a compressed air, and you would blow that in there, get some of the dust and or loosen it up. Next, you want something very thin, but something pretty strong. For instance, this is a back of a nail clipper. You're going to go into the cartridge slot. This is going to be very hard to show you. But can't really see. If I tilt it, yeah, you can't really see, but in yours you'd be able to see. You look inside and see if there's dirt. My Super Nintendo Mini, my one that's in storage, I showed in the other video if you watched it, was from dkoldies.com, and they said it was cleaned and stuff. Well, the outside looked cleaned, but I actually took this into the cartridge slot, like so. You gotta be careful because you don't want to bend the pins, so be careful, and be careful of little plastic pieces in there, alright? But you would basically just scrape it out, and I was scraping out hair. I don't know if it was people hair or doll hair, but there was like pounds of hair in there. I swear somebody's cat or something was sleeping on that NES. So then I did that and got all of it out. Sometimes you'll find gunk in there too, depending. And you might find bugs in these things or in the console itself, because they crawl in if you don't use them for a long time. So then after you do that, let's say you did that for a good while, depending if you needed it, take your rubbing alcohol, take your not that one, green one's the one I use. Where's the green one? Here. Let me put this one away for right now. Take your spoon, dip it in. You don't want to leave it, I mean, I'll just use my pants for now, but you could use a cloth. Don't want to make it too wet. I mean, if it's really bad, you could, but avoid excessing dripping is good. So you go in the slot like this, kind of like as if you were almost brushing your teeth. And go against them. Obviously, you'd normally be holding it. Push it down. Don't push too hard or not too soft. Just like if you were, just feel like if you were brushing your teeth. You go back and forth like that, and obviously the toothbrush can't always get that deep, so like in here it's not reaching all the way down, but it's getting most of the pins. So then after you do that, it may take a couple of times, and if your toothbrush, this one shouldn't look too, yeah, this one's not really, you can clean it off by dipping it in some more rubbing alcohol and wiping it off on something if it's really bad. Mine, as I said, I've done this before, isn't bad. So in order to get deep into this, what we're going to do is we're going to use our brush. Well, this is a big one, but this should work fine for this. So what you do is you dip this in here, or you get a cup. I'm just going to tilt it over quickly. So then you get it good and wet. This is pretty good. It's not the best, but as I said, normally I'd be doing this with one hand. I mean, two hands, so. And this thing can reach, all the way to the bottom. And you just go in there like you do with the toothbrush and try to get as deep as you can and rub it back and forth. And if you end up finding out you left a lot of stuff on your cartridge slot, take a cartridge you already cleaned and stick it in there and out, and sort of wipe it off a little bit too, and then clean off the cartridge again. I'm not going to bother to do that right now though, because I don't have a clean cart right now by me. So after that, you would let it dry basically. Then you would look at the rest of the board. Sometimes there may be like gunk, and you would gently wipe it off with a toothbrush, but be careful on the chips and around the capacitors and stuff. Then you flip it over. Now, as I showed you in this corner, you can, let's see, can it focus? It's kind of hard to, oh, come on. It's hard to see on the camera, but if you look in the corner there, right by the gray, kind of see some like orangish yellow, which is left over from when they solder in the pieces of the board from 20 years ago. I believe it might be flux. I'm not an expert on soldering, so don't quote me on that. But what I found out is if you leave stuff like that on the board, it will actually eventually eat away at the solder, sorry, especially after a good amount of years. My SNES had a bunch of solder come off from that stuff. So what you want to do is take your toothbrush, dip it in. Sometimes this is the type of stuff you may have to leave it in a good amount of wetness, because it doesn't always come off easily. So you rub it, and it slowly, hopefully, comes off. May not all come off, but just go over it. And you flip it over. Surprisingly, this isn't that bad, so I probably did this once. I just probably missed it a little bit. But sometimes your whole toothbrush will be orange. Like kind of like an orange muddy, like an orangish color. Like rust, basically, almost looking, but it's not rust. So what you do is, if that happens, you dip it in the alcohol and wipe it off on something before you're putting it back on the board. And you can actually go on this slot too if you want to clean it out, but since this was never used in North America, it's up to you if you want to. I normally do, but clean that out. And then you would also look at the other things. You could also just gently wipe off the board too if you had to. But look at all the soldering points, see if there's anything else that looks like that. I'll show you another extreme example in the future. I still have one more thing I have to clean, which will show up better. And then you would do the same thing here. Like for instance, on the multi-out slot or RF, you would just rub it in like that. And just use the rubbing alcohol. Be careful with the power supply though. I mean, you shouldn't have to clean that off anyways, really. It's plastic, you could, but be careful with that. The RF you could kind of do too. Rub it in, you know. Be careful though not to get the thing stuck in there. Then you would flip it over. You could do the controller slots too. Oh, if you're gonna, come on, there we go. You see, there's like pins in there. You want to clean those off. Occasionally around here, there's dirt. I cleaned this out already, but you would go push up and down gently, not to bend the pins, and clean it out with rubbing alcohol. And if you're gonna clean this out, I recommend you clean out your controller at the same time. Which you don't. You could actually clean inside the controller too if it's really bad. I do that. I'm not going to show you that now, but you could also just go over the inside of your control part on your Super Nintendo controller like that too, where it plugs in. So, because basically if you don't do that, it's like if you clean out your console, then you put a dirty game in there that you haven't cleaned, you're basically just defeating what you just did. And let me think, is there anything else that really needs to be done at this point? Oh, and you could, if you want to, blow it out with an air dust can. If you want, after it dries, you know. And double check, make sure it's dry and it's clean. And if it looks like it needs to be cleaned again, you know, clean it. Vice versa, depending on how your board is. I mean, as I said, I cleaned this one before, so it's not that bad. The only thing that's really dirty is the outside because my niece has got food on it. See? Oops. Oh yeah, and actually I should have removed the metal pieces because we're going to be washing off the plastic. Where is my... whatever. Here it is, my screwdriver.